Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. I'm Kevin Horn. I'm here with our venerable, every 2 months, like clockwork, a guest that comes on, a very special guest, Dave Huguenel. I don't have your usual bio in front of me, but I think almost everybody who watches the show knows you so well now that they probably know actually everything that I could tell them. But you served in 2020 on the Trump War Room,
Yep.
and of course in Oregon, you've worked on a regular basis over the years with the state legislature, with Lori Chavez DeRemer when she was in Congress and running for Congress, as well as um, you kind of work the whole strategic political media angle at Go Big Media that gives us unique perspective because you know Oregon, but you also know the national scene, and you talk to folks all over the country, and so we're glad to have you on the show with us tonight.
Always glad to be here, Matt. And I'm also happy to say too that tonight's show actually has a sponsor. I got this before. I got the obscure gas station iced tea. You know that's you'll be seeing me drink this tonight. This is obscure gas station iced tea. It's when you're thirsty but you can't make a good decision on what to get. It's it's the best drink to settle for, I think. So
Well, and we enjoy our beverages on this show. Not all shows do that. Joe Rogan, they smoke pot, but we just drink adult beverages whenever we can on this show and enjoy
yeah,
it.
it's still not legal on this side of the continental U.S. over here in Georgia. So if you want to toke up Kevin over there, be my guest. Over here, I'll be a law-abiding citizen for the evening.
I'll leave that to Joe Rogan and Elon to do. I'm probably just gonna stick to my Justice League water bottle here. So
There you go.
it's
I love all the different brands of water. By the way, there's what is it like Death Thirst or something like that. There's what is it like Liquid Death?
Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's funny that as a marketing guy for politics, it's I kind of envy the guys who are like their job is to market water, which is literally the most non-marketable thing, right?
Yeah.
It's an element.
It's a commodity for sure.
It's like the commodity of commodities. Like there's not different variants of water. It's just H2O. And these guys find these brilliant ways, and gals, I should say, find these brilliant ways to market it. I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool. But anyway.
Well, we learn a lot from the commercial marketing side of things for politics, don't we?
Right. Exactly. But bottom line is generic iced tea from a gas station. I'm ready to go. I'm hopped up on unsweet iced tea. Let's do this.
All right. Well, so since we last had you on, it seems like a political age ago, but it's been the last couple of months of the Trump administration. It's been the things that have gone on across the country, and of course, of late, the Democrats are trying to grasp and crawl their way back into something they can get traction with. And I think the last time you're on, you were saying, well, a lot of the stuff they're doing, they can't help themselves. They just feel like they have to do what they're doing, which is double down a lot of the progressive policies. And they shout down the voices of reason in their own party on a regular basis.
Right.
And then we just saw in fine style how they have these far left organizations that are actually funding this No Kings movement that was protesting everywhere in the country. And this is a boilerplate Democrat strategy they've tried in the past, and they think it works.
Right.
And they think that the mostly peaceful riots are a really good part of that because they frankly don't want to do anything about them when they happen.
Well, and here's one thing too, and what I love about these episodes and these talks we have every couple of months is like they almost act like a time capsule. And if we were to go back and look at our conversation from a couple of months ago, I think one of the things that we talked about a lot of that show was Doge and the effect that would have in campaign.
Oh yeah.
And I think one of the things I said, maybe not as eloquently as I'm about to say now, but I think the gist of what I was saying was Democrats really think that this is going to be their issue that they're going to latch onto. The reality is there's going to be 50,000 things that happen between now and the campaign. And I was half right. 50,000 things happened in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
There'll be another 50,000 things that happen between now and the campaign where Elon's basically been sort of, shunned or kicked out of the administration. I mean, he was scheduled to leave, but obviously left in a pretty big blow up sort of fashion, right? That was very public.
Yeah.
Um, there was, you obviously have, new developments with some pretty major attacks in Ukraine,
Yeah.
by Russia. And then obviously just over the weekend, I mean, you've got a full out war breaking out between two major regional powers in the Middle East, between Iran and Israel, that may very well end up having other world powers like the United States looped in. If someone today were to say the election is going to be based on X, all I can tell you is that they're absolutely wrong. Whatever X is, it doesn't matter. There's so many things that are happening. It is really hard to project November of next year, let alone November of this year, which has some major elections. What's going to be the top of mind? There are some major foreign policy things that are once in a generation that are happening right now. Economically, there's some once in a generation things that are happening. There's a lot going on. Not even to mention that the U.S. Senate is about to potentially pass one of the biggest, if not the biggest, piece of legislation for Trump's first year in office with the big beautiful bill. The ramifications that has politically. So, anyway, I say all that to say, not to skim over every topic we're going to talk about tonight, but if anyone's listening or watching, just know that if you're watching some pundit out there saying this, whatever the cause du jour, the issue du jour of the day is, this is going to be what defines the election. If they're saying that in June of 2025, they are dead wrong.
Yeah, I think that talking about Doge, that is so March, April of 2025. It's like no one is. It's not even in the headlines. I'm scanning the headlines here. The word's not coming up
right
now. They found a lot of stuff. They passed a rescission package that implemented a bunch of that stuff. But, Elon has left. He's gone back to the private sector. There was that, tempest in a teapot that occurred for a few days that Democrats are like, oh, here we go. They're fighting. And it just kind of went away. I think that you're right. There's no way that Democrats are, when people in the news are saying this is going to affect the 2026 election or the 2028 election for that matter, it's wishful thinking. They're trying to make it true by saying it, and they don't have anything to base it on.
Right.
Remember when they were talking about how inflation was going to spiral out of control here in the United States, that tariffs are going to go and wreck the economy? None of that's happened. In fact, inflation has stayed down. All these countries are cutting deals with the United States on tariffs. They've been suspended. When they start playing games with us, the tariffs come back, and then they come back and say, oops, we didn't mean that. And they start dealing again, like China, right? So this is just what it looks like to make major changes quickly to get the country back on track. And that's how you wield power, which the Democrats call that a authoritarian dictatorship. But from what I can see, he's operating within the law, and certainly the courts are resolving any gray areas.
Yeah, there's a part of me when, my eyes have always rolled when I start hearing words like fascism and authoritarianism come from Democrats. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when George W. Bush was compared to Hitler, and there were music videos on MTV called "American Idiot" and "Megalomaniac." Great songs, but wrong messages.
Yeah.
You had the vote or die campaign in 2004. If George W. Bush, won the election, you were going to die, was basically the message.
Yeah.
And here's what I'd say to any Democrat that says they hate fascism. I can't even pronounce the word.
Fascism,
Fascism. If you hate it so much, where were you when there were fascist policies with Democrat governors like Kate Brown that were locking down businesses, literally destroying livelihoods, destroying local economies, destroying communities by not allowing local businesses to be open? Meanwhile, big box stores like Amazon and Walmart and others were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do. Why is that type of fascism okay? Why, if you're gonna call out, we don't need any kings, we don't want any edicts or anything like that. Okay, great. Go exercise your right to protest, but explain to me why you weren't doing it 4 years ago or 5 years ago when families were absolutely disrupted and lost their way of life because of edicts that came from Democrat governors.
The vax mandate, which it turned out Biden, the courts ruled, didn't have the power to do.
Right.
He, in addition, if you want to look at fascism, you know what a fascist does when somebody starts saying things like what these guys are saying in the No Kings protests? A fascist would actually form or harness a government agency and weaponize it to go after those people and silence them and force social media to silence them and force media outlets to ignore them. Now,
Yep.
who did that? That sounds familiar. It wasn't that long ago, right? That was last year.
Or, well, to use that comparison, Kevin. I mean, the other one might be a little bit of a deeper cut. Is let's go back to the IRS and Lois Lerner back in 2010, 2011, targeting conservative organizations, with tax audits, as opposed to just targeting all of them.
Yeah.
Again, I think with Democrats, they I get what they're saying, and frankly, I agree with them. I don't like fascism either.
Yeah.
I just tend to be a little more, I don't like fascism from either party. Not just, it's not like I like my flavor of fascism, but I hate yours. And that's with Democrats. I think, that's the way that I see them from time to time, is that if the Republican executive branch does anything, and look, not to get too esoteric, right? But anytime the executive branch does anything, that's a form of executive power, right? It's what the executive branch does. Of course, you can look at that and make some tangential reference to fascism, because fascism is basically a full executive power kind of unwielded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Democrats make that all the time. But when they're in charge, fascism's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Or it doesn't exist, period, because they don't call it that. They come up with words that justify it and make it seem like it's absolutely necessary, like they're protecting democracy from Republicans, or things like that, which they went so far with that. And it is absolutely essential that the people who did that get outed, because a lot of them have escaped accountability for that. And hopefully there's going to be time and resources to do that, because I actually think that's how you don't turn the page back to people doing that again. There should not be a government agency that actively seeks to cause voices to be silenced in the media. There should not be a government-funded effort to do that. The government actually is violating the Constitution in a fundamental way when they get involved with doing that. And they did do it. But where are the people that did it? Are they being marched out? The people who gave the orders, the people who carried it out, where are they? And I do think that that's going to be part of what shapes our future. I don't know if it's going to be the biggest political issue, but just think, the last 2 months, there's been a renaissance, hasn't there, in the realization on the left of the condition Joe Biden was in and the fact that people covered it up. There's actually some Democrats angry about that now.
Right. No, I think it's fair. I mean, look, the last point I wanted to make too, this is on a more personal note in terms of just this Democrat rhetoric is, and Kevin, I think you know this, maybe your listeners and viewers don't, but I grew up in Saudi Arabia as a kid. I lived there in the early to late 90s. Saudi Arabia still is, but was very much, even more so when I was there, was very much a theocracy, an absolute dictatorship. And I've seen what it's like to live in a society that is truly fascist in nature. It's government-run industry, and with some really strict laws. If you're women were not allowed to drive. I remember when I was middle school-ish, basically, like once you're a male, kind of above puberty age, right? So 12, 13 years old. You're not allowed to wear shorts outside. And there were religious police that would come and harass you and whip you if you were wearing shorts. And I remember, there were, if you were caught stealing, you would have your hand cut off.
Yeah.
It was a very, and this wasn't like, in the long ago. This is 1994. This is not, this is 30 years ago, in the modern era. And there are still countries very much like that. So when I see people marching over a bridge in Portland saying we don't need any kings, no kings in the United States, I don't think you actually know what a king looks like in this
No.
age. And I dare you to go try to live in a country that has one, because I guarantee you it doesn't look anything like this one.
So if we were going to start kind of keeping our eye on what does matter as far as what can influence the political landscape, sometimes you can read tea leaves now, stuff that you know is inevitably going to come to the fore. We don't know if it'll be one of the top issues, but it will play out. I think it's safe to say that the state of the economy is probably going to matter a year from now.
Sure.
And so there are some things going on now. You mentioned the big, beautiful bill. You mentioned there's a lot of deregulation happening. There's an effort through tariffs to get free and fair trade to happen around the world, which actually could stoke economic growth, and then of course it's to get the federal government spending under control, which puts a lot of pressure on interest rates and the ability of people to eventually afford the things like homes and the policies that shape all of that. What do you see kind of bubbling up that a year from now might matter a lot more? I mean, we're going to have, is it possible we'll have an economic boom time going? Are there some clouds on the horizon with anything that you see, political clouds?
I mean, I mean, certainly, yes, the economy is always going to be this kind of undercurrent of, has my life gotten better or worse under a Trump administration, right? I think that there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic on where the economy is heading, right? There's, I think one of the traps that Democrats have fallen into is that with every Trump policy, whether it's the big beautiful bill or it's tariffs, right? They're very Chicken Little. If this happens, the sky's going to fall. And certainly things like tariffs, it can lead to an increase in prices. Some of the things, in terms of, obviously the big beautiful bill, it does increase our national debt, but it also gives some pretty necessary financial aid to working class Americans, like no taxes on tips, things like that.
Yep.
I think that I'm not an economist. I'm a political guy by trade, so I would say roughly my rough understanding of economics and the way this stuff works is I have every reason to believe that things will get better. Interest rates are the highest they've ever been. They were like that before Trump got into office. There's a real expectation that rates will go down. That will increase. Other thing too is like, look, I mean, not to seem extremely draconian, but I mean, if we are, sending, weapons to the Middle East and to Eastern Europe, those are American companies. Those are American factories that are building those, building those munitions. That's not bad either from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, that's trade.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the ultimate question for me, and this kind of ties into everything, but economics specifically. And this is the conundrum that I think Democrats have. On one hand, and I think the no king stuff is certainly evidence of this. If you're in the Democratic base, you're very motivated to go out and vote against Trump, right? There's nothing more motivating to go vote for a Democrat than I hate Donald Trump. That is like catnip to them. Yeah. That said, Trump ran on a set of promises in 2024, ran very successfully, or won very successfully based on those promises that he made. And if we just take a step back, and I know everything kind of seems chaotic with the big, beautiful bill and the tariffs, and it's like the news cycle's constantly changing, Doge is, all this stuff. The reason it feels chaotic, one of the reasons I would argue, is Trump's one of the first presidents that's actually carrying out the promises that he ran on.
I know.
He's doing it aggressively.
Yeah.
So if he won because of these set of promises, and he is able to deliver on those promises before the midterm, and logic would dictate that that's got to be some good news for Republicans. Unless for some reason people change their mind and they do want taxes on tips, and they do want bloated government spending, and they do want all these things. But I'm being a little facetious there. I don't think that's the case. Right? Yeah. I think there's still reason to be optimistic that this is going to be it's always tough in the midterms if you're the party in power, right?
Yep.
I mean, kind of king of the hill, it's hard to stay on there. I think the only time in our lifetime, Kevin, that Republicans or any political party for that matter have retained power in the midterms was in 2002 and in the aftermath of 9/11, which was
Yep.
obviously a very historical foreign policy event when with our homeland attacked. So,
But case in point with that one, Dave, who would have been able to predict that in uh, June of 2001?
right,
You'd been insane to like make
right.
that prediction, right?
I mean, certainly the CIA didn't predict it, right?
No,
bad,
no.
bad joke, but hopefully there's no CIA stands listening. No, the look, you're absolutely right. I mean that changed the course of everything. I mean, George W. Bush always saw himself as a domestic policy president. He ran on a domestic policy platform, and he was suddenly thrust into being this. And no one remembers George W. Bush for his domestic policy. No one remembers him for his education bill that he did with Ted Kennedy and all that sort of stuff. They remember him for 9/11 and the Iraq War. That's it. Because of one singular event that happened on one day in September of 2001. Yes, there are so many things and so many opportunities for this race to change, and there's so many ways that it could change. Right? It could be economic. It could be domestic with these riots and these protests that are happening. We've seen this play out before, right? Then you've got the Middle East with Israel and Iran. You've got Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Russia. Who knows which one's going to matter the most? One of them, but it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. And I say all that again. I feel like guys like me, when we come on shows like yours, we're supposed to sound smart and be like, well, this is what I think, and this is my expertise says this, that, and the other. I hate it when guys like me do that, because the smart thing to say, the honest thing to say is I have no friggin' clue what of these are going to matter 10 months from now, let alone 2 months from now.
Well, 3 months ago, Democrats are holding up egg cartons during President Trump's joint address to Congress, blaming him for the price of eggs, which have now since declined.
Right.
But went up 50% before he ever came into office.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people that are trying to create the political environment, either through opportunism or propaganda. And I look at that stuff and think, they tried to talk the economy down for 3 solid months in a row. And it might have had an impact temporarily on confidence, but then there's the real economy. The real economy, is it becoming more expensive? Are your order books slowing? What's really happening? Is inflation going up? And it turns out that so far, it's actually a pretty healthy economy, despite the efforts of people who I think have political motivations to talk it down, either from a policy point of view or just purely politics. And so there's the loyal opposition is going to be the loyal opposition, right? They're going to continue to try and exploit any slip up, perceived or real. They're going to try to frame everything as the fault of Trump or negative, but he's actually just doing what he said he was going to do. And I saw, in terms of deportations, especially getting criminals out of the country, but in general, the deportations, his popularity has gone up because of that, which it must be very frustrating. Even CNN had to report that last week, I think.
Yeah. No, I think again, even with the deportations, and I think Democrats do a decent job of cherry picking the saddest stories, right? And look, every story of a deportation on some level is sad, right? There's a human, these are human beings. It's unfortunate that they find themselves in this situation. That's not to say that at the end of the day, the law shouldn't be abided by. So with that disclaimer, at the end of the day, it was very clear in the 2024 election, whether you're running for Congress or even in some case, even a local office, people have been fed up with the lack of firm immigration policy in this country for decades. It hit a boiling point. President Trump said he was going to fix it. That's exactly what he's doing. Nothing that he's doing is a surprise if you listen to what he said last year or in the several years leading up to the election.
Yeah.
Um, so voters knew what they were getting when they voted for him. They're getting exactly what they voted for. And while Democrats are doing their level best, I mean, again, hats off to them for trying. They're doing their level best to make it look like this is a terrible thing. I don't know how true that's going to ring to some voters because they're like, yeah, look, I get it. It sucks. Like, it's sad that this is happening to these people or these things are happening. But bottom line is they shouldn't be here. They never should have been here. They came in here illegally. It's time for them to go back to their country of origin.
And if they had criminal background or records, then, when he said, I'm going to get them the hell out of this country, I don't even know why Democrats spend or waste their time fighting that fight. And it's almost like catnip to them, isn't it? Like they just can't resist coming down on the side of the so-called Maryland father who spent his time with human traffickers and has his MS-13 tattoo, uh,
Right.
and was simply being returned to his actual home country. The reason why they said he couldn't be returned, these judges, is because as a member of a gang, which they acknowledged, rival gangs could pose a threat to him. I don't know if that's actually a very good reason for asylum in the United States. We don't offer asylum to foreign gang members to stay here so they can be protected from other gangs. That's not what asylum is about in the United States. And so, why do they think that's a good political strategy? Are they worried about losing their base that does care about this stuff? Because I know swing voters. I don't think swing voters are buying it.
I wish on one hand, because I've listened to some Democrat consultants that have agreed that listen, like that like even Democrat consultants are basically saying, yeah, we need to be a little bit more honest and hard line on immigration. I just think to kind of like how you said it's catnip, Kevin. I I really wish like tomorrow President Trump would put out a press release announcing that the sky is blue just to see Democrats say that it isn't.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I think fundamentally, like that's the problem that the Democratic Party has and their base has, is that they are incapable. Incapable. It's like built into their genetic code for some reason with Trump specifically. If he says something, they have to automatically disagree with it and be on the exact opposite and be the most extreme version of the opposite of what Trump said.
Yeah.
Um, and
Like
that
tariffs.
is,
You and I probably both remember when Democrats loved tariffs. They
yeah.
thought it was a great way to keep some of the traditional labor unions going, like the UAW, by having super big tariffs against, steel and cars and all that, right?
You're 100% right. I mean, look, it's one of the reasons I've said for years now. I mean, the Republican Party of today, like the coalition of voters that make up the Republican Party, to me looks more like the Democratic Party of like the mid to late 1980s.
Yeah.
We are the Republican. Let's not get it twisted. The Republican Party is 100% the working class party here
Yeah.
in the United States. We are the party that has the economic interests of the middle class and the working class in mind. The Democratic Party is far more progressive, far more elitist, far more
Corporate.
corporate. Yes, 100%, 100%. And it is uh and it shows, like, to your point, like with tariffs, it's one thing because, yeah, I mean, if you're private sector trades, what Trump is doing and what this administration is doing is putting American workers first, which that's something that I could see Bill Clinton probably said at some point in 1993,
Yeah.
right? Was we need to, if Bill, there's probably a quote of him saying that somewhere, and he was probably on the floor of like an auto factory in Detroit when he said it, right before he signed NAFTA.
Yeah, it sounds like pure Dick Gephardt, to be honest, as
Yeah,
well. Guy who ran for president, was the majority or minority leader at various times in the House. That guy, I mean, when I think back to that, there are Democrats that I think are still in office that utter these very words out of their mouths. And now they've got talking points saying tariffs bad, will be hurt,
right.
and all this stuff. And it's like, it's just politics. It's so
It,
transparent.
It is, and I know I've talked about this ad nauseum on your show, so I'm not going to monopolize the rest of our time on this topic. But obviously, I mean, we're going through a political realignment. That's part of the tectonic shifts, right? That's one of the reasons that if you're if you're a white college educated woman that lives in Lake Oswego, you are much more likely to be a Democrat now than you ever have been. And if you are a Hispanic, non college educated, low income worker that lives in in this outside of Astoria, you're more likely to vote Republican now than you ever have been.
Yeah.
The magnetic poles politically they're still in the process of kind of flipping, right? And that's why, I mean, frankly, some of the consultants that I worked for when I was coming up in politics, I got my start working on campaigns in like 2005, 2006. A lot of the guys that were kind of in my position then, 20 something years ago, some of them are just straight up Democrats now. They feel like the party's left them because, and to a sense, it kind of has, right? They are, the Republican Party is a much different party. It started a little bit under Trump, before Trump. You could actually see some things starting to change, going as far back as McCain in 2008 in terms of Hispanic voters and things like that. But Trump in 2016 was 100% gas in the fire, right? And just lit that match. And we've been in a major realignment ever since. It probably stops relatively soon. I would imagine in the next 4 to 6 years, it kind of solidifies. And that realignment probably stays pretty consistent. If you look at American history, it'll be that way for the next 40 to 50 years.
And that ethnic gamble that the Democrats took, thinking that they would own Hispanic Americans, I think is probably going to backfire historically, because that's part of that realignment, isn't it? As well as young males and black males in particular are just, there's a shift that is happening. Some of it could be temporary from the election and from the candidates that existed, but some of it clearly is based on these fundamental principles that that people from these different groups adhere to, and just they don't buy the BS, they don't buy the woke garbage, they don't buy. They believe in competition and merit, which I think is actually an American principle. Even if it's more embraced at this point, or appears to be embraced by the Republican Party than the Democrat Party, but you can't march out phonies like Governor Tampon Tim Walz and expect men are going to just say, well, that sure is a masculine guy, I'm starting to feel more connected to the Democrat Party. It's like a lot of silly window dressing, which I know every party in the past, when they've gotten way out of sync with where most people are at, they make these silly moves, these silly miscalculations. I think we can probably look back and find a time period where Republicans had the same problem.
Yeah.
And we had to right the ship. We had to figure it out and lose some more elections before we got it straight.
Right. No, I think I agree 100%. And obviously, it was the Obama campaign guys in 2008 that famously said demography is destiny. And it's almost like that's like on the Democratic Party's tombstone now, right?
Yeah.
They were 100% right. Even then, prior to then, I mean, George W. Bush, again, one of the things that's kind of lost about his administration, I believe it was in his second term, he really called for immigration reform. He was going to try to put immigration reform through. It's just at that point he didn't have the political clout to ram it through Congress. He understood that the Hispanic population, regardless of illegal immigration or not, it's not an illegal immigration thing. It was always going to be the fastest growing population demographic in the United States. That's not because of illegal immigration. That's just basic demographics. Everyone's kind of understood that. Everyone's also understood that the African American population in the United States has been lockstep with Democrats since Lyndon Johnson. But again, I've always argued, if you look at two different people in the world, at least in the United States, if you were to look at a white woman in Lake Oswego and a black man in Philadelphia, their lives couldn't be any dissimilar. They are very polar opposite in the worlds that they live in and they move through. So the idea that there's a party coalition that would have to bring those two those two demographics together, that is a really hard coalition to hold together. And that's why, Democrats, I think, made the decision that, listen, we need to focus on gaining more with white suburban women. And if you're doing that, it's harder to have your message resonate with ethnic minorities that live in urban areas, because they just have different policy needs. They have different things that are more important to them.
Yeah, and actually, the white suburban woman, liberal, college educated, is probably voting for DEI and the woke policies, and thinks the police defunding is probably a good idea. And the black male in Philadelphia, not so happy now, actually, with their neighborhood falling into crime and squalor and being overrun and being told that there's no police when they call them.
I was gonna say. I mean, if you live in South Philly, or yeah, I think it's South Philly. Do you care more about whether or not a university has a safe space for woke activists, or do you care more about there being fentanyl on your street and like kids dying on your front porch?
Or do you care about whether the kids that are going to that woke university come out the other end after $100,000 in debt, able to do anything that'll allow them to pay back that debt and become productive members of society and growing industries? Or are they just going to turn into more baristas that join Antifa? I mean, it's been kind of that crazy, hasn't it?
No, it has been, and I think it is one of the things that's been fascinating, and I think Trump has been able to do very successfully, is really kind of make it clear that his priority as president is going to make sure that people are healthy, happy, safe, secure in their livelihood, the basic bare necessities that have been neglected by a lot of these Democrat enclaves across the country, whether it be Atlanta or Philly or New York, or I would say Portland, but Portland might just be too far gone. You guys are just nuts out there.
Yeah. Well, I think the expensive woke luxuries that existed for a while are people are sort of losing that shift.
Does your nude bike ride? Does that count as a liberal woke luxury? Is that one?
No, that's just a limited clothing event. Yeah, to celebrate bicycles. But look, I don't think that people want to fund Ivy League colleges with giant endowments and giving them tons of money so that they can turn around and become the main den of stirring up all of this stuff that has their daughters competing with a guy on the track team.
Right.
And suddenly common sense just burst through. And I remember one of the ads that captured this was the ad, which I do think it was effective in the markets it was shown. It showed Kamala Harris, or in this case, I think it was the guy in Ohio that was the Democrat that was running for re-election to the Senate. I'm forgetting his name, but he's been around. He's a liberal for decades who started talking about how he's working with President Trump. That's how desperate he was. Mm-hmm. They said he's not for you and I, he's for they, them. And they showed like the craziest examples of people Biden appointed and famously turned into like just absurd, silly woke appointments to important agencies, like that guy that was stealing clothing and wearing lipstick everywhere, and he's supposed to be in charge of nuclear policy.
Yeah, I was like, he had some like non-important job, like protecting our nuclear facilities or something.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I really think that struck a chord, and suddenly people who used to think it's no big deal or didn't have any feelings about it, they started to have feelings about it. It became, and I think so. Democrats, I don't get why they're doubling down on this, why they think that the trans stuff is really just a great political tactic, but I'm not going to stop them because it's pretty obvious that I talk to Democrats who think, well, yeah, we've had enough of that. We got to stop doing that.
Well, and I think for the most part, most Americans, we come to expect our federal government to be bloated and wasteful, right?
Yeah.
And inefficient might be another one. I think on some level, at least prior to the Biden administration, we all assumed that bottom line, at least they're not stupid. They may be bloated, and inefficient, and wasteful, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of smart, capable people there.
Yeah.
And I think in the Biden administration, we're like, oh no, oh mother of God, they're stupid too. This
Yeah,
is
we're gonna add to inefficient and
right,
bloated, idiotic,
right,
and foolish.
right. And I think yeah, that's kind of the turning point for Americans. Is like we can handle the other ones, but you can't be stupid too. If you're stupid on top of all that, then no, we need something new.
Well, one last phase here to our show. If you got a few more minutes, I
Yeah.
know we're on different time zones, so I appreciate you hanging in there.
Again, I'm hyped up on Pure Leaf, no sugar, unsweetened iced tea. So
Hey,
I got 9 more minutes for you.
the fuel of captive audience.
Right.
It does also come down to numbers because right now it's very close in the House and
Yeah.
it's still uncomfortably close in the Senate. And as you said, it's a midterm when the party in power tends to lose ground. But so we can't pat ourselves on the back too much for Democrats being foolish and Republicans doing some things right and not making too many egregious errors at this point, doing what they said they were going to do. But we've got two things that I think can shape the election. One is the numbers, right? Just the sheer like battle in the trenches. You and I both know what it's like fighting in these trenches for congressional seats, and it's a district by district, candidate by candidate battle that is shaped by the larger picture. It's shaped by the money that's available. It's shaped by all these things. But the bottom line is they don't need that many seats in the House to have a major shift in what happens, and perhaps a likely shift in what happens in 18 months. And then there's the other issue, which sometimes creeps up. Congress isn't near as successful right now as President Trump in doing what they said they were going to do. This big beautiful bill will be a big thing to deliver, and Republicans in Congress should rightly hang their hat on delivering that. But if these things that President Trump's doing, especially by executive order, just enforcing the law or using the discretionary power that he has, is done, it'll just be undone, just like he's undone Joe Biden's silly policies. It'll be undone by a future president if there isn't a Congress to pass it into law and make it so that we never go back to funding transgender plays in Bosnia and all this crazy stuff that was going on that Doge found. They'll just go right back to it, and maybe even worse, because then they figure, well, we kind of got away with it, so we'll just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully one of the legacies of Doge is that maybe that's slowed a little bit because they did get away with it for a long period of time, but obviously Doge was able to go in and successfully root out a lot of these really ridiculous programs. Like one of my favorite ones was like was basically like a DEI program for hiring in Madagascar, which I don't know much about Madagascar, but it seems like it's a pretty homogenous country, you know. Like I mean, how much DEI do you need there? But you know, I think that because even one of the podcasts that I actually listen to be completely open with your listeners, I listen to Pod Save America, which is a very liberal left-leaning podcast. I listen to that because I love hearing their point of view. Sometimes they raise some points that I think are really interesting. And one of the things that I've heard them talk about is they wished that they had done more of this during the Obama administration. And I didn't really explain Pod Save America. Those are all like the former Obama campaign guys that run that podcast. They're almost jealous or basically jealous that like Obama, when he was in the presidency, didn't do more of this Doge type stuff and root out some of these programs. And so I think that there is a legacy here that is to the Republican benefit, that we were the ones that finally went in and kind of decluttered the basement a little bit.
So some of the politics might actually wall off or limit those excesses that they went to, and maybe added, just force them to start engaging in a little bit more common sense, some more balance. If you
Yeah.
want to spend more money, you got to save more money.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that makes sense. I also think that the Democrats do this stuff, like Obamacare still exists. It's a version of it, but they pass it into law very narrowly, not with much more of a comfortable margin than the big beautiful bill is going to squeak through Congress itself.
Right.
And once it's in there, even once you had a Republican Congress in both houses and a Republican president, you still couldn't really get rid of it. And replace it with something that works better. Now, I think that can contribute to people's frustration sometimes, because it seems like we can never actually fix a problem. It just sort of grows, and then the Democrats just hope that it can survive. We still have Social Security and Medicare virtually untouched,
Yeah.
which are fiscally doomed. It's okay to say that, because that's what the actuarials are saying, but no one can do anything about it. And I just wonder if that could be a factor next year, is the frustration people feel that after all this optimism and all this progress that was made by the administration itself, it's going to be replaced by some frustration that we have these intractable problems that only Congress can solve, and they just won't do it.
Yeah. No, I think um sorry, I actually just completely just spaced out there. I'm sorry, Kevin. I just
No, that it's just
it's on
people.
it's on the sorry, go ahead.
So people kind of feel like,
Yeah.
well, we aren't going to solve the deficit. We're going to slow it down a little bit. Well, our slide towards 50 trillion has been slowed a little bit, but
Yeah.
we're not heading to a balanced budget anytime soon. And the Democrats will get back into power, maybe narrowly, and
Maybe.
they'll explode it again.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that I mean, look, Democrats are going to control Congress again, right? Is it next year? Is it 3 years from now? Is it four? It, politics is always cyclical. There's never going to be this moment where Republicans win, the Democratic Party falls apart in shambles, and we become a one-party country. That's just not how
Yeah.
that's not how the American political system works. But I think when it comes to some of the long-standing problems that we have, the deficit obviously being the biggest one, and it's a national security concern, it's an economic concern. Um, there is no way to truly solve that without looking at entitlement reform.
Right.
It just, if you've ever seen, and there are plenty of pie graphs out there. If you just look at the federal budget, Doge could go and cut every single little thing from every department and every agency in the federal government, and that is not going to put a dent into what is really spurring our deficit, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Mhm.
And frankly, Kevin, for folks like you and folks like me, that's a major problem. At this point, if you're my age, I'm 40 years old. By the time that I'm old enough to receive Social Security, there's not going to be any Social Security for me to receive.
I think that there's probably I'm 58, and there's going to be some truth to that.
Yeah.
For the Gen X, that are just saying, I don't think I would even consider that a reasonable way to live. But at the same time, there are forces that are going to eventually force both parties to confront what's going on. And raising taxes dramatically is probably not going to fly in 10 or 20 years any better than it does now.
Well, and that's the other thing too. I mean, there's been plenty of economists that have come out and said raising taxes doesn't solve the deficit either. I mean,
No.
it is entitlements have become such a massive part of our budget that you cannot address getting back to a balanced budget without addressing those. And I've heard some arguments that like some economists think that a deficit ran government is fine. Again, I don't. It doesn't make sense to me. But I'm a lowly political consultant, not an economic major. So I took the easier degree in college. I took one economics class and it was really hard. I eked by, I passed. I got a B in it. But once I took that one, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna let smarter people do that than me.
Well, it's all relative to the size of the base of population and the productivity and the ability of an economy to pay for things. And if our economy grows faster, which is what President Trump wants it to do, then the deficit becomes less of a problem.
See, that sounds smart. I wish we were friends when I was in college. You could have helped me get a B+ in that economics.
Well, but at the same time, a lot of people in Congress don't seem to be able to do math very well, and
Yeah.
and so I do think that's one of the challenges that we're facing at this point.
Well, I mean, well, just to clarify, Kevin, I think elected officials and politicians are very good at doing math, but their math is based on 2-year increments, not 10 or 20 or 30-year increments.
Yeah,
Right. You're if you're in Congress or even if you're in the Senate, I mean, your entire alpha and omega is based on 2-year or 6-year elections. If you're a president, you've got 4 years to worry about stuff. Some of these problems that deal with the deficit, they are, and this is part of the reason that we're dealing with it now. This is no shock to anyone, right? People were talking about entitlement reform 20, 30 years ago because people saw this down. But at the time, it was like, well, someone will deal with that 20 years from now or 30 years from now. It's not my problem. It's slowly becoming our problem. And it's finally coming to a head. And just unfortunately, just again, the way that our democracy works is it has to become a real political problem in the moment for it to be dealt with. Democracy is not good at dealing with problems that are long term. I mean, and that's also just basic human psychology too. It's hard for us.
It's very backwards looking. It's very
Yes.
backwards looking. Yeah, especially the bigger the form of government. Last question: is there hope for states like Oregon and some of the blue states that might have some purple tendencies at times, but we certainly there's a lot of people in Oregon that just like feel like it's hopeless. There's a lot of people leaving the state.
Of course,
I want to stand and fight, but
of course, there's hope in places like Oregon. I mean, Republicans have won there. I mean, Lori Chavez Dreamer won there in 2022. Obviously, didn't go our way in 2024, but I think there's still a lot of different factors. You guys were able to pick up some legislative races not that long ago. I will say this: you've got some Republicans in your legislature right now that are thinking about siding with Democrats to vote for like 30-something tax increases for this transportation package. Having Republicans help Democrats pass tax cuts is not a good way for Republicans.
Tax increases.
I'm sorry. Sorry. See, it's so alien to me that they'd even think about doing that.
Yeah, it's hard to say Republican and then tax increases.
Yeah, you got Republicans that are like itching to vote for multiple tax increases. I've heard anywhere from 11 to like 35, depending on how many you measure in this transportation bill that's out there. Look, here's what I've said to numerous people that I've talked to. Last year, Oregonians emphatically said, we do not want Republicans to govern. We want Democrats to govern, right? That's why you have a Democrat governor right now. You have a Democrat supermajority in the House and the Senate. Oregon said we want Democrats to govern. Republicans right now, their job should be to let Democrats govern. Give the voters exactly what they voted for. Give them unfiltered, purified Democrat policies. When Republicans reach across the aisle and vote yes and do all these different things to help Democrats pass their bills, all those bills magically become bipartisan solutions in the Oregonian. You can't really use them in campaigns. And then they're at the end of the day, voters are left with these sort of pastel messages as opposed to pure contrasts. If you want to have hope in Oregon, Republicans have to get smart. And you have a lot of smart Republicans out there that are saying the same thing I'm saying now. Let Democrats pass all of the bad stuff they want to pass. Let voters in Oregon understand what they voted for. And then you have hope next year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when you're already in the super minority, how much should you be driven by fear of being in the super duper minority, which doesn't really make any difference in the end?
I will tell you this. Last year, I worked on legislative races in Colorado. We picked up, we were in the super minority. I worked for the state house, like the lower chamber races for the legislature. I love being in the super minority for those races because, and again, their caucus did a good job of, they voted no on this stuff. They didn't side with Democrats on all their little pet projects. So everything was clear contrast. We ran some really great ads, even won some awards for some of the ads we ran out there. We picked up, and by the way, last year in 2024, 3 states went further left: Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. Of those 3, Colorado was the only one that I was doing legislative races in. We actually, it was the only state for Republicans to gain legislative seats, and we went out of the super minority.
Hmm.
And I'd like to think that I had a small part in that, but because we made the ads and stuff. But bottom line is, the fundamental reason I think that they were able to do that is their caucuses did a very good job of setting it up to where there are clear contrasts. This is what Republicans stand for. This is what Democrats stand for, and then we were able to run ads litigating that, and we won.
Yeah.
So my advice to Oregon is the same thing. Make it easy to litigate the differences between you and the other party next year, and you'll win seats.
Yeah. Well, you just used the language of Ronald Reagan from 1976. We need bold contrast, not pale pastels.
That's right.
And that will help people understand how to make choices, because that is what ultimately you're facilitating, is clarity about a choice.
100%.
Yeah. Well, there's a message of hope right there, and we appreciate you sharing that message with us. This is always a special thing to get together with you, Dave, and talk through all this stuff, which people sometimes don't know how to calculate the political side of it. They hear the news, they react to it, and then they get told what to think about it, often by the same media outlets and politicians that are involved with the news itself. And well, it's good to have your independent voice shaping what's happening here, and also at all these different levels, because there's the national and the state and the local level to all of this, and we can't lose sight of any of that. They're battles to be won, fought and won everywhere.
Yep. Nope, I agree.
Well, thanks for sharing us. Thanks for sharing your brand of tea to stay fueled up for the evening, iced tea, and who knows what the news will be telling us in 2 months. Do you want to take any bets? Any 2-month predictions?
Aliens have landed. We found the lost city of Atlantis, and everyone won the lottery. Those are the 3 things.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to bet against any of those, because I frankly don't know either. So I'm probably just going to take. I'm not going to take the bet. I'm just going to go with you on that one. But
sounds good.
Thanks again for joining here tonight, Dave Huguenel, man extraordinaire in the political scene here nationally, and we'll look forward to having you on in the not too distant future again to talk more.
Have a good one.
Have a good one too. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Captive Audience.